Let's jump right into this explainer, where we're unpacking the exact precise instrument that separates a totally failed engineering project from a targeted high-impact solution. I mean, think about it. Have you ever been handed this massive, urgent project wrapped up with a perfect little bow, only to realize months later that you just built an incredibly expensive solution for entirely the wrong problem? Yeah, it happens all the time. Today, we're dissecting exactly how that happens, and more importantly, how you can actually prevent it. We're going to break down what we call the discovery trap and walk through an absolute masterclass in uncovering true root causes. To really wrap our heads around this, I want you to put yourself in a specific scenario. Imagine you're sitting in a conference room with Marcus Reyes. He's the COO of a regional payer called BlueRidge Health Plan. You've barely even sat down, and he immediately hits you with this staggering figure, 11.8%. According to the Experian 2025 State of Claims report, that right there is the national average initial denial rate for healthcare claims. It is a massive, bleeding wound for their operations, and Marcus is understandably stressed out.
And just to put that 11.8% into perspective for a second, that translates to an astonishing $262 billion tied up in initial denials nationwide. That's a staggering amount of capital just sitting in limbo. Marcus is taking a lot of heat from his board. The pressure's on, and because of this panic, he demands that you build an AI claims triage classifier to fix their denial rate, and oh yeah, he needs a working pilot in exactly 6 weeks.
So, in full panic mode, Marcus makes a classic textbook demand. We want AI to fix it. Can we get a claims triage classifier live by then? And right here, this is the trap. This is the exact moment where so many brilliant software engineers and consultants just completely fail. Because your natural instinct is to be helpful, right? But if you just say yes to Marcus and go ahead and scope out that exact AI classifier, you are essentially guaranteed to spend the next 6 weeks building a prototype that absolutely nobody is going to adopt. You're building a Band-Aid that won't actually stop the bleeding, all because you accepted the customer's diagnosis without doing your own. So, to avoid jumping straight into these premature solutions, we actually rely on a remarkably simple but profoundly effective tool. This originated way back with Sakichi Toyota on the shop floor in the 1930s, and it was later formalized in the Toyota production system by Taiichi Ohno in 1988. He famously wrote that by repeating why 5 times, the nature of the problem as well as its solution becomes clear. We know it as the 5 whys. But look, there's a massive difference between knowing the theory of the 5 whys and actually executing it correctly when you're sweating in a high-stakes discovery call. What's really fascinating here is the contrast in how this is applied. A successful 5 whys is a ladder. Each rung purposefully narrows the focus and commits to a deeper structural cause. It builds logically on the last answer. On the flip side, you have an interrogation. That's what happens when you just annoyingly repeat the word why against a moving target. It fruitlessly attacks the client, it generates a laundry list of random complaints, and it just frustrates the person you're trying to help. We want to climb a ladder. We do not want to conduct an interrogation. Before we apply this directly to our BlueRidge scenario with Marcus, I want you to ask yourself a really formative question. Out of all 5 whys, why is the second why the most consequential? Take a second to think about the dynamic of a real conversation. That first why simply gets the customer to repeat the surface-level symptom they already knew about. It's easy. The magic, or honestly, the complete disaster, happens right on rung number 2. Here's the thing. That second why represents a crucial fork in the road, and it's where most discovery calls just completely die. At this fork, the customer will usually offer a really lazy answer. For instance, they'll say something like, well, claims are denied because our providers are just sloppy. If you accept that, boom, your ladder collapses. You are forced to either push past that and dig into actual structural issues, or you remain stuck forever at the symptom layer, blaming sloppy providers. You absolutely have to force the narrowing. So to climb this ladder effectively and force that narrowing, we use a very specific breathing rhythm. This is anchored in McKinsey's problem-solving methodology. We essentially alternate between fact-finding questions that widen our picture, asking what, who, and when, and hypothesis testing questions that deliberately narrow our causal claims. These are usually phrased something like, if X is the cause, we'd expect to see Y. It's like breathing. You breathe in to gather facts, and you breathe out to test a narrow hypothesis. Let's look at how this builds in practice for BlueRidge. Our engineer starts by breathing in with a widening fact-finding question, which specific segment of the claim is failing. Marcus replies that it's the intake field structure. Then the engineer immediately hits that consequential second why, breathing out with a narrowing testable hypothesis. Okay, if intake form drift is the cause, we'd expect denial rates to spike right after your January plan update, did they? Marcus is then forced to admit that, well, actually, yes, the rate jumped from 9.2 to 11.4%. The latter is working perfectly.
Section 2. The Trapdoor, the Data Quality Why.
Now watch out, because just as your ladder gains momentum, there is a hidden pitfall here. At rung 3, our engineer does something highly strategic. They interrupt their own hypothesis chain to ask a vital data quality question. How exactly is that 11.8% measured? Is that before or after clearinghouse rejections? This ensures the 11.8% metric isn't just some measurement artifact masquerading as a business crisis. If you skip this step, you could literally spend 6 weeks building an AI model to improve a number that the customer can't even reliably reproduce on their own dashboard.
Notice this final, beautiful descent to the actual root cause. The engineer verifies the denominator at rung 3. Then, they test a hypothesis about software templates at rung 4. And finally, they drop the ultimate fact-finding question at rung 5. Who actually owned that bulletin distribution back in January?
And here is the massive plot twist. Marcus admits that the team responsible for that distribution was actually split up during a 2024 reorganization. Literally nobody ended up owning the template adoption tracking. Think about that. The 11.8% denial rate isn't some widespread provider failure requiring a massive, futuristic AI model at all. It is just a downstream symptom of a broken, entirely unowned internal workflow that was masked by really bad metrics.
Section 3. Exiting the discovery call.
Okay, so we found our true root cause, but the meeting isn't over yet. How do we successfully exit the room without caving in and promising the COO his bloated, totally unnecessary AI tech stack? We have to translate what we just found into action. You do this by replacing his tech stack with what we call a 3-slot reframed problem statement. You systematically translate those vague symptoms into actionable engineering logic by outlining 3 things. 1, the symptom, 2, the structural cause, and 3, the narrow path prototype shape. This framework keeps you completely in control of the scope. For BlueRidge, locking in those first 2 slots is easy now. Our symptom is highly specific. It's the 11.8% post-adjudication denial rate that moved 2.2 points post-update. And our structural cause is crystal clear. That missing ownership during the January update meant literally no one was tracking template adoption across their 3,200 contracted offices. So when we get to the 3rd slot, the narrow path prototype we are actually going to build, it looks like this. We propose a lightweight registry and adoption tracking workflow. We specifically call out that it is not the denial classification machine learning model Marcus originally asked for. Building the AI would have been a catastrophic failure, because the problem wasn't a lack of AI. The problem was simply that BlueRidge had no idea which doctors had actually downloaded the new forms. Finally, you walk out of that room holding 3 hyper-targeted follow-up questions. You ask, what fraction of offices need tracking to move the needle by just 1%? You ask who is going to own this new registry on day 2 so it doesn't get lost again, and you clarify exact reporting definitions to fix their metrics. By doing this, you leave the scope firmly in your control, you completely bypass the premature AI pitch, and you actually set your engineering team up to win. Ultimately, understanding how to rhythmically deploy the 5 whys ensures you are solving the actual structural problem, rather than just building a very, very expensive Band-Aid that nobody is going to use. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Next time a client bursts into the room demanding a specific, flashy solution, will you just blindly build it for them, or will you take a breath and start climbing the ladder? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this serves as a solid blueprint for your next high-stakes discovery call.